Hello folks, I'm Steve Gilly, the top of the Cumberland Gap, and this is Stories, a History of Appalachia. Today we're taking a hike over the Cumberland Gap, the gateway to the west during the time of the Appalachian frontier. We're starting at the Daniel Boone Visitor Center just off Highway 58 in Lee County. Now the entrance itself passes under this shed or awning or whatever you want to call it, next to which you can see metal sculptures representing the history of the Gap, with Native Americans, buffalo, settlers, and wagons. Coming along with me as usual is Roxy, who thoroughly enjoys a good hike. Don't you, girl? The Wilderness Road was the most important way to the west during the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Now, this road, blazed by none other than Daniel Boone, was previously an Indian trail linking the Cherokee settlements in Tennessee and North Carolina with the Shawnee towns along the Ohio River, and had been used as a hunting trail and trading corridor for centuries. The Wilderness Road, as developed by Boone, started at the Long Island of the Holston near present-day Kingsport, Tennessee, and ran up into Kentucky over the Cumberland Gap. The Wilderness Road was even older than a Native American path. It originally started as the trails created by, believe it or not, American buffalo, which once roamed the Appalachian Mountains. These trails were followed by the tribes of the area, including the Cherokee and the Shawnee, and was called, let's see if I can get this right, the Athawamini, or the Great Warrior's Path. Here we come to the Gap Cave, or as it was known for years, Cudjoe's Cave, after an 1864 novel about an escaped slave who sought shelter there. Now, the cave was actually found by Dr. Thomas Walker during his 1750 expedition. He named the gap after it, the Cave Gap. More on him in a minute. Now, the Park Service normally conducts tours of the cave during the warm part of the year, or at least they did before the COVID pandemic hit. I have no idea when they go back to touring. We'll just have to see. Well, Roxy, why don't we take a little side trip and go down to the iron furnace, In 1819, an iron furnace was built below the Gap Cave, along with that Spring Creek, and using it just like Dr. Walker had predicted nearly 170 years early. Iron ore was mined nearby, limestone added in the process, and charcoal made from the trees nearby was used for fuel. The Gap Cave stream itself was used to power large bellows and a hammer mill. Here's an interesting bit of trivia about that iron ore, by the way. Middlesboro, Kentucky was built on an unusually flat bit of ground, at least flat for Appalachia. Here's a picture of Middlesboro taken from the Cumberland Gap overlook. Notice how there's barely a hill or a rise in the town? Well, that's because what you're looking at is a crater caused by the collision of a small asteroid. And that asteroid was made largely of iron, which was left in the crater and in the nearby mountains after it impacted the Earth. And it was likely that very iron that made its way into that iron furnace at Cumberland Gap. The first European to cross the Cumberland Gap was one of two explorers sent to the far west, meaning Appalachia, in 1673. Abraham Wood was himself an explorer and fur trader in the Virginia colony. And in order to discover more furs, Wood sent exploring parties into Appalachia. In 1673, he sent James Needham and Gabriel Arthur to the Cherokee principal town of Chota to establish trading ties. Well, here you can tell we're almost at the top. See how steep it is? You can tell even better if you turn around and look the other way at where I came up. Needham left Arthur at Chota to learn Cherokee and to establish good relations with the tribe when he went back to Virginia to obtain manufactured goods with which to trade. On his way back, Needham got into an argument with his Indian guide, who settled the matter by killing him. In the meantime, Arthur traveled with the Cherokee throughout the Appalachians and, in the process, became the first white man to cross the Cumberland Gap into what's now Kentucky. He stayed with his hosts all the way into West Virginia before returning home, becoming the first European to reach the Kanawha River Valley by likely following the Big Coal River or Paint Creek to the Kanawha. He arrived at Fort Henry, that's Wood's settlement, in June 1674 with a load of furs and several Indian companions.
Roxy, you ready to go do a little walking? Come on.
Here at the top of the Cumberland Gap, 100 years or so, the Daughters of the American Revolution placed a stone marker with steel plaques on every side. This marker is one of several they placed throughout the area to mark Daniel Boone's Wilderness Road, and it's been here ever since. This marker has seen the road over the gap, has seen that road paved, has watched travelers drive by year after year, and has seen it turned back into a trail. Now, that direction is the trail leading up to the Tri-State Point, where Tennessee, Virginia, and Kentucky meet. And we won't be going there today, but here's some pictures I took last winter when I made the hike up there. In 1750, Dr. Thomas Walker, a surveyor and investor in the Loyal Land Company, led an expedition into the area. Now, his job was to explore 800,000 acres of land that the Crown had granted to the land company, and in the process discovered the Powell River and Powell Valley, then discovered the Cumberland Gap, which he called the Cave Gap, for a cave that he discovered up there. Walker and the 5 members of his group had set out from Albemarle County in Virginia. Now, later, Walker recorded his impressions of the Cumberland Gap in his diary. On the north side of the gap is a large spring, which falls very fast, and just above the spring is a small entrance to a large cave, which the spring runs through, and there's a constant stream of cool air issuing out. The spring is sufficient to turn a mill. Just at the foot of the hill is a laurel thicket, and the spring water runs through it. On the south side is a plain Indian road. On the top of the ridge are laurel trees marked with crosses, others blazed, and several figures on them. As I went down on the other side, I soon came to some laurel in the head of a branch. A beech stands on the left hand, on which I cut my name. This gap may be seen at a considerable distance. The mountain on the north side of the gap is very steep and rocky, but on the south it is not so. We called it Steep Ridge. After discovering the gap, which Walker originally called Cave Gap, the group followed the warrior's path for about 10 miles northwest to the Cumberland River, which he also discovered and named. Near the river, the party built a log cabin, one of the first in Kentucky. After spending 2 months vainly exploring the hills of eastern Kentucky in search of the storied bluegrass region of central Kentucky, the party crossed the mountains north of Cumberland Gap and returned home. In the short term, the Loyal Land Company settled people in southwest Virginia, but not Kentucky. After reaching the end of the parking lot, no video due to my own oopsie, sorry, Roxy and I headed back to the Daniel Boone Visitor Center, but we aren't done. Let's head over to the Kentucky side for a ride up to the lookout. After all, what's a trip to Cumberland Gap without that, And here's what replaced that road over the Cumberland Gap, the Cumberland Gap Tunnel. This is one of only 2 tunnels where you can enter one state and come out in another. Any idea where the other one is? Hint, it's in Appalachia too. This tunnel opened in the 1990s, and already an urban legend has sprung up about it. Stories have been told of strange hitchhikers thumbing rides through the tunnel. These tales usually have the hitchhiker being very quiet, then getting antsy and more nervous as the tunnel gets closer. Then suddenly they scream, "Gabriel's coming! Gabriel's coming!" And then they disappear. In one story, the passenger actually sprouts wings before he disappears. I've never experienced that, and if I did, I'd probably keep it to myself. You know what I mean. Oh, that other tunnel? It's the East River Mountain Tunnel, which connects Virginia and West Virginia on Interstate 77. I'll be quiet, let y'all enjoy the scenery. Thanks for watching. Be sure to click that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up if you don't mind. Till next we meet. So long, everybody.